So it's the difference of creating a routine where you do something every day and you get into that, building up those 10,000 hours to becoming a genius. Dynamite is more exercises that you can apply right now so that you can get something started. One deals with the cause of your inability to act, and one just simply deals with the symptoms. But that's okay. So dynamite, some examples of things that you can put into your toolkit include streaming. So streaming is where you simply just sit down and you decide, I'm not going to be intimidated, I'm just going to write, I'm just going to paint, I'm just going to code, and I'm not going to look at it, I'm not going to self-censor it, I'm just going to do that for 10 minutes without thinking. All right? Great, do it. It really requires you to step over that barrier of inaction where you don't have the intimidation of a goal to achieve, you just need to start. Story dice is an interesting element. I picked some up in New York at the public library, and they're really cool. They were called Rory's Story Dice, and I played with them with my daughter, and it's really just as simple as a bunch of dice with little pictures on them, and you sit down and you roll these dice, and different pictures come up. One might be a house, one might be a fish, one might be et cetera, and you start thinking of these ideas. You start coming up with stories. You start coming up with ways of applying these little icons to something that you're doing. What it does is it breaks the ice from there being nothing there to there being something to actually react to. Oh, it's a fish. Okay, I'll go paint a fish. Or it's a piece of popcorn. Maybe I'll write a song about watching movies. It seems silly, but it's a way to get over that barrier and that momentum. It's not silly to everybody. 10 ideas in 10 minutes is something where you literally just give yourself a block of 10-minute time, you give yourself a question, and you come up with 10 ideas no matter how bad they are. Actually, the badder, the better. The worse the idea, the better you're off because you get them out of the way. And another fascinating thing about the creative mind is you come up with a bad idea and you write it down, your brain starts to actually try to solve that bad idea and try to make that bad idea better. But at least you get it out. So you just give yourself 10 minutes, you write 10 ideas, 12 ideas, 13 ideas, and they're there. And again, you have something that you can actually use to start from. The law of 1% takes a little bit longer, but it's essentially the more things you come up with, if you can come up with 100 ideas, if you can, there's this guy, can't remember his name right now, but he works on logos, and what he likes to do is create a 10 by 10 grid and draw, or product design, and he'll draw like 100 different ways that you could open up a bottle, that a bottle could be designed. And what's great about that is he drew a whole bunch of just absolutely terrible ideas, but he got past all those terrible ideas and started getting into some of the ideas that he wouldn't have considered because he was forcing himself to create a massive quantity to be able to react to. But this is just a fast way to get started. And then you get into the picks. So the picks are really not about blasting your way through a barrier. This is about, picking up a spoon and making your way out of jail. It's about digging a tunnel through a mountain. It's really about deciding that you're going to set aside some time, that action is important to you, that practice leads to experience, and that you're going to do something every single day. I like 10 for some reason. I like the idea of 10 minutes, but the 10-minute wedge is really just something where I say, set aside 10 minutes every day as part of your routine. Make it something that you do. It's something that you love. If you want to practice guitar, play guitar for 10 minutes every single day. If you want to learn life drawing, then draw for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes. What'll happen is that's a period of time that you can afford. It's a period of time that you can give up some pretty simple thing. You can find 10 minutes. You can go to bed 10 minutes later. You could get up 10 minutes earlier. It's not going to make or break anything. But what happens is you build that into your routine. You do it every single day, that 10 minutes becomes a wedge because you start realizing, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. You know what? I'm not going to watch that TV program today, or I'm not going to get my work done that I needed to do tonight, and I'm going to spend more time playing the guitar or life drawing or working on that code or making that application or whatever it is that you're actually passionate about. Again, this isn't for everybody. Some of you have no trouble at all in action. Some of you get out there and you do your thing every single day, and that's fantastic. But for those of you who can't or don't, the routine is the best way to get into it. The idea of a genius mortgage is just that you want to. I love the 10,000 hours concept that Malcolm Gladwell talked about, and at one point I actually drew a graph that had 10,000 boxes on it, and I put it up on my wall, and then I would check off an hour every single time I worked on something, and then I realized that it was going to take me 10 years to get through it, and I got rid of it. But so that's a little bit about action, the dynamite to blast through some of these short-term barriers, and the picks to really slowly get through something and slowly evolve and get through to the other side and make it part of your daily life, your routine of going down into the mines and being a creative person. So connection is the next element. The connection toolkit, how can I create things that are better? Maybe I don't have an issue with action. Maybe I just need to be able to problem solve better. I need to understand things more. I need better quality ideas. So, what do you need to know? That's really what connection is about. What do I need to know? And one of the core ways of connecting is finding a focus, which is really hard to do when there's these giant machines driving around. So finding a focus is often called a creative brief in the advertising universe, but believe it or not, this works for anything. When you're sitting down to do a task and you want it to be better, having a focus, like I said earlier, is something that just allows you to have ideas gel. One of my favorite quotes is that chance favors a prepared mind. So if you have a focus, then all the things and elements that happen to you in a given day can kind of fall into a camp of, yes, they relate to what I'm doing, or no, they don't relate to what I'm doing. They relate to what I'm doing. I'm going to capture them. I'm going to catalog them. I'm going to use them later, perhaps, in something. It's called research as well. But so how do you have a focus? What is a focus? Well, you have to understand what is the key message that you're trying to get across. What is that? Another one is, what is your problem? What's the problem you're trying to solve? What is the goal that you're trying to achieve? And that's slightly different than the key message. The key message is really what you want to get across. Solving a problem or achieving a certain goal is slightly different. Then you have to understand who this is for. So this is about connection, after all. This is about being able to relate it to other people. In advertising, we call this a demographic, but really it's about your audience. If you're a musician, who is going to be listening to this music? If you're a programmer, who's going to be using this application? If you design clothes, who's going to be wearing it? And then the purpose. What is the true purpose of what you're doing? Why are you doing it? And these don't have to be in marketing speak, and they don't have to be complicated. Really, just the act of thinking about it gives you some idea, a sharper idea of what it is that you're trying to achieve. It can be very powerful. So for connection, there's two elements for the creative toolbox, and those are lassos and mortar. And again, we've got the short-term and the long-term thing happening here. We've got short-term solutions and long-term solutions. The lassos are really about the associations. So the capturing and cataloging that I talked about, capture, catalog, and review is something where you use tools, you have tools available to you so that when you come across something that relates to your focus, you can capture it. And I use my mobile phone for a lot of that. I use elements like Evernote or Read It Later, Instapaper, so that when I'm surfing the web and I come across an article on creativity or an ad on creativity or anything that has to do with what I'm trying to focus on at that particular time, I can click Read It Later, catalog it, and look at it later. But I put it into a wonderful little box that I can go back that's labeled. Lassos are more temporary. They're a bit more superficial. They're great for advertising because we often just need to get something done quick and get a quick connection with someone. Mortar is more for real art. It's more for something that you want to stand the test of time or something that you want to relate to a bigger audience or to the human race or something significant. Not that advertising can't do that, of course, but it doesn't very often. So, like I said, lassos are about associations, and there's all kinds of fantastic little exercises that you can use to make these associations happen. Random word is amazing. Edward de Bono coined the term random word as an exercise where he creates a list of 60 words, and you ask someone to pick a number between 1 and 60, and then you look it up on the list, and the word might be something like ball. And then you look at ball and you go, well, what words do I think of when I think of ball? Well, I think of round, I think of sports, I think of helium and balloons, and so you write down a bunch of these associations, and then you apply those associations to the problem or the task or the idea that you're trying to solve, and all of a sudden you're thinking about things differently, and you're making new connections, and you're making new associations, and you can come to an understanding that you would never have come to before. Connect the thoughts is just a silly, fancy, fun way of saying mind mapping. And mind mapping is again, very similar, where you take a piece of paper, you write down your focus. What am I trying to achieve, or what's my goal today? Or what am I trying to write about or talk about, code, etc.? And then you branch out from it in different nodes, and you say, if I want to write about creativity, I put creativity in the center, in the circle, and then I go, what is creativity? What does creativity relate to? Well, it relates to music, it relates to science, it relates to et cetera, et cetera. And then I pick another one of those nodes, and I branch off from there, and I pick one of those nodes and branch off, and I can kind of create this connected story or connected path, and the further out I go into the fringes, the more interesting associations I can actually find. So that's fun, mind mapping. Tangentometry is similar, but it's really about making connections that have to loop together to create some kind of a story. It's where I often liken it to surfing, where we talk about you go on, and I don't mean real surfing and on water, but where you can fall into a rabbit hole when you're doing research and you're online and you see something and you can so instantly link to another thing and link to another thing and another thing and another thing, and all of a sudden you're 8, 10 links down and you have no idea what you're doing to begin with. You have no idea what you're actually looking for or researching. With tangentometry, all you need to do is every time you connect to another tangent or another element, you ask yourself, does this relate back to my focus? So all you have to do is remember the focus, and does this relate back to my focus, and how does it relate back to my focus? And all of a sudden, when it does, you realize that all of those elements can loop back together and tell an interesting story.